I also invited Michael Lamb to talk with us tonight and to show us a presentation that he put together. Mike is our financial consultant, I'll call him, provided to us by PDE as part of the whole leaving the recovery program. And back when we were in the distressed district category, Mike's been invaluable, and he sits in on almost all of our finance meetings and works closely with Rick. Mike put together some thoughts and projections based on the budget as it was a week ago, and some of those were, I thought, important enough that we asked him if he'd be here tonight. So Mike, if it's okay with you, we are recording this because I know some board members couldn't be here. So you're okay with that?
Yeah, Ed, that's no problem at all. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share this, with you all tonight, and also, with those who can watch the recording.
Okay. And so, Michael, somebody you'll be working with or getting to know next week is Dr. Juanita Thorpe, who's on. She is well, she's not, hasn't been really elected yet. It's not November, but she's a Democratic candidate for the school board in Wilkinsburg, which means welcome to the school board, Dr. Thorpe. So,
we've elected you already, Juanita. It's too late. You can't say no.
Thank you.
So I've been asking likely incoming board members to sit in on any of these meetings if they want to, just to, get a leg up on things. So, and I see that Eric Steadley joined us also. So welcome, Eric.
Hello, Eric.
And Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks again. And I will attempt to do this here. I think you should be able to see my PowerPoint here in a moment.
Perfect.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe just before we jump in, I know that obviously it's early June. The budget needs to be passed, in late June by the end of the month. Just to let you know sort of the process that Rick and I go through to update the projections, and we started this last year. We started this process, Rick, Victoria from our firm, and myself back in probably March, to really start taking a look at, where this current fiscal year, where things stood, and trying to project, how things would end up at the end of this year. So Rick sort of does his own projection. We do our projection, and then we sort of ask each other questions to try and find a way to, maybe close the gap on maybe where our differences might be. And I think overall, both Rick's projections and our projections for this current year are showing that, the district has saved a lot of money due to the pandemic and the shifts that you all have had to make internally in terms of your operations. So we started that in March, refined it. Obviously, we've been participating in the budget discussions. And one thing I do want to applaud Wilkinsburg on is the participation that you get by your board in the finance committee meetings and in the budget meetings, because it might be 3 or 4 extra meetings in a month that, you have to attend. But, there's always good questions. There's good dialogue. And I think it was about mid-May, Debbie asked me about the, where our financial projections beyond this current fiscal year stood. And my comment back, or my answer was, we need to have a somewhat finalized budget to be able to really project out long-term, where does Wilkinsburg stand, financially. So Rick sent us information at the end of May. I think it was like May 25th or 6th. So we took that information, went through the projection process and updating everything, and put together the PowerPoint. And we didn't get to share it with you last week. You had other things that were on the agenda more pressing. So here we are tonight, taking a look at those projections. So just to jump right in, I guess, on slide 2, and I did, I was able to email this, Juanita. Unfortunately, I didn't have your email address. But hopefully it got to you, or you at least have a copy of it now. But the projections, what we did is we pulled the actual numbers for 18-19, 19-20, and then we included our projected numbers for this current fiscal year that you've already seen. And then we used the budget numbers for 21-22. And just a couple of notes on the budget numbers for 21-22. I used the millage reduction that had been discussed and planned by the board, which was the 3 mil reduction in real estate tax revenue. So that is reflected in the slides that you'll see. And then the second piece is, the ESSER funding that's been made available, millions of dollars in federal relief that all districts are receiving. You'll be able to use those funds, I guess. But what I wanted to do is look at your projections as if those funds didn't exist. We know that they'll certainly help the district. There's a lot of one-time needs that you can use that for, a lot of operating costs that you can use those funds for. But I wanted to exclude those because what I've seen with some other districts is, they just hear that we're getting a lot of money and we'll use that to fill the holes in the short term. And then they sort of ignore, the long-term impact or the long-term financial shape of the district. And so I wanted to exclude both the revenue for ESSER and the expenditures for ESSER. So that's an important note. Actually, when Rick sent me the budget file, I noticed that it did have that in there. And, so we made sure to run those reports and pull those items out. So again, all the slides, that are coming, I did not include any ESSER revenue or ESSER expenditures that are planned by the district. Slides 3 and 4, 3 deals with the revenue and slide 4 deals with the expenditures. What I wanted to show was the change from fiscal year to fiscal year, both in terms of dollars as well as percentages, just so that you could see, with the assumptions that Rick and I discussed and agreed to use for the projections, that we're being somewhat consistent with the historical results that we've seen within the district. The biggest change obviously is in this budgeted 21-22, in revenue, again, we're taking out the 3 mils of real estate tax revenue. There was also, I think, some state grants that had dropped off that you had previously received. I think there was a big school safety grant. So that came off. But again, this budget does tie to, what had been planned by the district, again, without the ESSER funding. And as I said, the next slide shows the expenditures, same thing. You can see, the annual change in expenditures, for 2021, we're projecting that your expenditures are going to be, $1.4 million less than the prior year. A large part of that is your transportation costs are, down significantly. And even though we know that the charter costs have ticked up a little bit, there's been other areas where you've been able to save money that will ultimately help, build your fund balance moving forward. So again, this was just to provide a little bit of perspective on, what has changed historically, along with, what we're projecting, moving forward. So in terms of, what our assumptions were when we looked at the revenue for 2023 and then 2023-24, we did project about 1.5% growth in the real estate tax revenue. Also the same growth rate for the earned income tax. Now I know that I think that area has been somewhat lagging for the district, in the earned income tax area, but I think that the 1.5% is conservative enough that that would be appropriate to use moving forward. We held the delinquent tax revenue flat, and I also held the state and federal subsidy revenue flat. And the reason I did that is there has been talk in the legislature in Harrisburg that they know that all this federal relief through ESSERs is coming to the districts. And, there's been talk about well, why should they change the basic ed formula, or why should they change, the special ed formula when, districts are receiving these extra dollars through ESSERs? So I think, again, just, I know from participating in your meetings, you always want to be conservative on the revenue side. So again, we held those state and federal subsidies, somewhat flat funded over the next 2 years. Obviously, we all would like to see charter reform take place. We would all like to see the basic ed, funding formula, updated with the governor's proposal. And if that happens, obviously that will be a benefit to the district, and that we'll be able to update these projections moving forward. But right now, we felt that it was conservative just to hold those line items flat. In terms of expenditures, we did look at salaries and benefits, and that's obviously one of the largest expenditure areas for the school district, being that you're in the people business and educating students. We projected a 3.5% increase, and I believe that was all based on the contract that was passed at the beginning of this fiscal year, or right at the end of the last fiscal year. We projected the tuition to grow at about 2.75%. And when we looked at that percentage, we came up with based on about a 3-year average of the Act 1 index. Because Rick and I talked, obviously a big piece that's outstanding right now is, the PPS agreement that is going to expire at, the end of fiscal year 22. And I know that you all have certainly been active in, the conversation with PPS and renewing that agreement. But I think in that the current language of the agreement, it does say that, the tuition can be adjusted based on that Act 1 index. So again, we sort of looked at 3 years, took an average of about 2.75%. And, I felt that that was appropriate even to apply for the charter schools. Now, again, in other meetings, we've talked about, the district's going to be implementing a cyber academy, and you did lose students during the pandemic, as did a lot of school districts, and the goal of pretty much every district, as always, is to recruit those students back inside the building. So, I know that you have, an aggressive marketing and PR campaign that, you want to put out into the community and bring those students back. And I think you will bring those students back, but I think you will also see, just even if even with the number coming down, the way that tuition rate is calculated, it typically does increase from year to year. So I think it is still appropriate to include, a little bit of an increase in that charter tuition line. And obviously, the goal would be to recruit every student back and make that number, reverse course and head downhill as opposed to uphill. And then for the other operating expenditures, we looked at inflationary rates, on the Department of Labor's website at, 2.25% was sort of a consistent number that we saw. So again, we're conservative on the revenue side, but we're being conservative on the expenditure side as well. I'll just maybe pause here. I don't know if there's any questions from anybody that's on the line. If not, I'll continue on.
Michael, just one question. This is Dennis.
Yep.
With the Spanish teachers that we're hiring this next year, along with if this virtual academy, the cyber academy happens, I thought that money, and maybe Rick can speak to that, I thought some of that money was coming from our ESSER funds for this year, to set that up. And I realize we've got a couple years with the ESSER funds, but is that included in this budget? I mean, assuming there's not going to be ESSER included. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, it does, Dennis. I'll speak to that. So in our budget are those positions. The only position that we have in the budget for next year's ESSER funds is the online coordinator position. The cyber positions have not been used for ESSER. I'm not so sure we could even use that for ESSER funds. And again, that would be an ongoing cost, and we knew that we would absorb that anyhow, so we did not put that with ESSER.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't
So,
sure.
Rick, it's Ed. So we did not cover next year's admin salaries out of Esther. I thought I heard we did.
Well, no. So we did based upon the fact that we had to because the tax reduction was $1 million and we were $1 million short. So,
Okay. So that's where we got that. Okay.
yep. Yeah, we did. Now in my budget, it does pay for those salaries, but in Mike's projections, he has not included that. He has just basically had that coming out of the general fund.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's probably there's a glowing difference with that between Mike's and my projections because realistically we probably shouldn't be paying for the administrative salaries out of the ESSER funds because that's an ongoing cost that we've had years prior and will continue to have.
Yeah, that was one thing that after looking at Mike's presentation and talking about this more deeply with you, that was one concern that really jumped out at me. Wait a minute, why are we covering ongoing salaries, ongoing expenses out of ESSER money, which we know is going to go away in a couple of years? What are we going to do at the end of that couple of years when we all of a sudden have to start paying administrators out of our own? You know what I mean? Out of our own general fund. So I don't want to go belabor that, but it's kind of like, I don't know what, paying people, putting all the administrative salaries on a credit card that has some 3-year low interest rate, and then all of a sudden it's going to jump up. Or that's a bad analogy, but you know what I mean? It's not a good budgeting technique in my mind. Okay. And Mike, I just wanted to thank you for pointing out, in some of the revenue we're not going to have. I forgot that school safety grant was huge, and that covered. Then that counted as revenue. So I forgot all about that. So thank you.
All right. Well, good questions and good feedback. We'll go ahead and continue on. I guess here on slide 7, again, the green bar is showing the revenue, red bar is showing expenditures. Again, 18, 19, and 19, 20, those are actual numbers that tie to the district's audit and annual financial report submitted to PDE. And then you can see there 21, 22, again, that reflects all of the assumptions that we discussed, as does 22, 23, and 23, 24. And I wanted to show, just in terms, again, not only just looking at the budget as a whole, but also looking at, past surpluses, as well as, any future surplus or deficit that would be, created by the projection. So you can see, really over the last 3 years, you have really been able to establish a healthy fund balance, in large part due to savings achieved through the pandemic, as well as, some of the larger grants like the school safety grant. But then you can see that, things do reverse course without those ESSER dollars. So again, we know that the ESSER dollars can help plug these gaps. However, like Ed just said, when that low interest rate goes away on the credit card, or when the ESSER funds go away, we want to know in 2-3 years, what our true condition is. And if this is it, I think it's, just important to make sure that we discuss everything and, that the board is fully informed as they, make their decisions. So then just to take that surplus again, the 3 years of surpluses that you had, you've built up a fund balance. We're projecting it to be close to 7 million. However, in 3 years at the end of 23, 24, that fund balance does fall below the 5% threshold. And so, for those that may not know, when a district is on the fiscal watch list that PDE has, one of their criteria, and they have multiple criteria, but one of the criteria that they look for to take a district off of that watch list is to have a fund balance for a 3-year period over that 5% threshold. And you can see that you've done that over the last 3 years. However, if you would fall back below that, that could be something that PDE would say, well, we're not going to take you off the list just yet. We want to make sure that, your budgets are sustainable in future years. So I guess, as a result of what we looked at in the last 3 slides, with the 3 mil reduction resulting in multiple, deficits in future years, I know that at one point the conversation, in one of the finance committee meetings was, well, what if we did a 1 mil reduction, or what if we kept the millage rate the same, or if we did a 2 mil reduction? And I think, Rick presented some different options to everybody on, just what that impact would look like. So I went back and revisited that, based on what I saw in the projections. And this slide here, so we have the red line is, that's the budgeted expenditures. The blue line is the revenue. So the current millage rate for the district is 29.5 mils. So you can see, even just by holding that flat and not using ESSER dollars, there is a little bit of a gap. You can see if you reduce it by 1 mil, that's about a $500,000 gap, and then it does continue or compound, with each additional mil that you reduce revenue by. And then I just put together a couple slides to show, again, and I know that this is a very busy slide, a lot of information. The red line being the expenditures. This purplish line is essentially where we've been over the last 3 years. And then the green line is basically if millage holds where it is right now at 29.5, and I wanted to show, what that gap looks like for 2023 and 2023-24. So you can see if you do nothing with the millage and just leave it the same, next year you're going to have about a 2 mil deficit. And in 2 years, you would have about a 3.8 mil deficit. And obviously, if you reduce it a mil, 2 mils, 3 mils, that deficit does grow. And this, takes the same approach, with, the surplus and the deficit. Again, we realized that the green line, there was going to be a little bit of a deficit even with just holding the millage where it is, but then you can see, it grows by about 850,000 with each year being the difference between, your expenditures exceeding your revenue.
Okay, Mike, can you take a question now? So
Sure.
Make sure I get it on these projections. So even if we let the millage rate stay right where it is, we're looking at running into deficit spending in these future years?
Yes. So, and again, if we're factoring ESSERs out of the equation, and just looking at if we do nothing, you're going to be, just under what your budgeted expenditures are right now. So if we come back up here, so you'd be about at $100,000 deficit between, this point and your expenditures. And then that grows by about 500,000, 400,000, with each reduction in millage. So again, this green line, you would have about $100,000 deficit, that then compounds, moving forward. You'd have about a 2 mil deficit next year, and then 3.8 mil deficit. And the concern really would be is, if we were to stay the current course, and move, look at these projections moving forward, the concern would be that possibly even in just 2 years, you would be back in a position where you would need to raise the millage. And you may not be able to raise it to the level that you need to, given the limitations that are set forth in that, in Act 1. So again, that was really just, my goal in trying to point this out and share this information, with the board as you're, figuring out your next steps with the budget.
And one more clarifying question, please. When we, in these graphs, when we look at expenditures, that's including, because this year we took a huge hit on charter school tuition. It was $2 million higher than what was budgeted, a $2 million hike. So these projections don't do anything about that. The assumption here, when you say, assuming we don't do anything, this is what happens. That also means assuming we don't do anything to rein in the charter expenses of any kind, especially charter school expenses, right?
Well, so, for charter schools, I guess we just projected about 2.75% growth. Again, knowing that you are going to try and recruit those kiddos back. But we've seen that historically that number has gone up. Again, even if the number remains flat, the tuition rates for, the district increase typically. So that is reflected in the red line on this graph.
Okay, thanks.
Good questions. So just to touch on the fund balance, as a continuation of the previous two slides, this purple line is based on the budget that, has been presented most recently, with the 3 mil reduction. So again, you can see your fund balance is down to just under 1.3 million in 2 years. Obviously, if a lesser reduction in the millage occurs, the slope becomes less gradual and you're able to retain that fund balance a little bit longer as you move forward into those future years. So the green line here would be, if you kept it at the 29.5 mils, 1 mil, 2 mil, and 3 mil reduction. So just sort of in summary, I guess, I wanted to include, observations. Again, the district has made significant financial progress, despite obviously going through a pandemic that, none of us saw coming, completely disrupting, everything that we knew in terms of educating kids. It's placed a burden on the administration, the school board, the teachers, the kids, everybody. And even with those changes, you have been able to significantly save money to use for future periods. My concern is that, the 3 mil reduction is too much in terms of a cut to the real estate tax revenue. As we saw, even just maintaining the current millage rate does put you in a deficit position even to, the next 3 years, really. You've made a lot of progress in your fund balance and that would be substantially reduced. And, if you do continue forward with the 3 mil reduction, certainly you may have to come back and look at a tax increase in the future years, as well as possibly, programmatic cuts. And I know that, again, the district's trying to do a lot of good things programmatically to bring kids back in and cut down on that charter costs. So there's just a lot of unknowns. I think with the PPS agreement still hanging out there, if one thing that we've discussed a lot in the meetings is, for real estate taxes, if we see that assessed value continue to climb, which is a good thing, because that can help offset a reduction in millage if that assessed value continues to increase. I guess even just in the collection percentage, that's obviously an unknown. I think historically you've budgeted around 79, 80%. This past year we saw a little bit higher of a collection percentage. And I think as we all keep a pulse on, the numbers moving forward, if we see that percentage continues to tick upwards, again, that would help support, maybe another reduction in millage, in the future. So again, I just want to share this information with you, answer questions, but I feel like my role, in being, an advisor to the district and in working with Rick is, I want to try and provide information to the board so that ultimately you can make the best decisions for the district and the kids. And, so I'm happy to take any questions and answer anything you might have.
Mike, if I can, before any questions, and I don't know if you said this earlier, but you and I talked about this today. And when we talked with Ed, I think it was on Tuesday of this week, he brought up a really good point that, we just settled that teacher's contract.
Correct.
And, based upon how we settled it was based upon the current millage rate and the current revenue that we're bringing into the district to be able to pay for those new contract rates. So I just wanted to make sure that, we talked about that at this meeting, because it was a really good point from Ed that we gave them, a nicer deal with some good perks to the contract.
So,
Yeah. Go ahead, Ed.
yeah, something I don't get, and I know I'm dense sometimes. Rick knows I can be dense when it comes to numbers, but we've done over the last few years at the 29 something mil rate, we've done really well at building up the fund balance. Way better than I thought we could. Okay, and so but when I look at the slide on, hang on one second, let me pull it up. When I look at the fund balance slide, I'm not sure it's numbered, but it just says fund balance at the top. The green line, which is if we don't do anything, if we keep the millage rate the same, our fund balance declines by a lot. From 23 to 24, we lose about $2 million there. So why? Just to somebody who's a real novice at this stuff, why are we dipping into the fund balance in those years to balance is that it? We're dipping into the fund balance to balance the budget. And why aren't we still being able to pay our way with our revenue?
So, and I'll answer that first, Mike, and then you can jump on if you want. So, as a lot of over the next few years, the cost of our, staff are going to continue to grow, but along with that staff comes the PSERS rates, the healthcare rates, and most importantly, the increase in tuition for charter schools and the outside play schools and PPS.
Yeah, so just to add on to what Rick shared, the simple answer, Ed, would be that in these projections, when we remove ESSERS out of the equation, the expenditures are growing faster than revenue. And again, this revenue is assuming that the 3 mil reduction occurs. But again, the green line on this slide does show that even if you do nothing, the expenditures are still outpacing revenue, even by just holding the millage flat over those 2 years. And that's why there is a reduction in the fund balance, although it is a lot less drastic than, the other lines that you can see there.
Yeah.
We need to give ourselves our own charter and then pay ourselves to educate our kids. The charter rates. Isn't that what this is telling us?
You wouldn't be the first one that has had that idea, Eric.
Okay, I was just wondering if I'm crazy here, but it seems like the school districts that are meant to educate the broad set of children in our society here in our state are getting less and less, and we're giving it all over to the charters. Why shouldn't we become a charter?
I think that Eric, I think there's a district or two in Pennsylvania, or there are some districts that have started charter schools somehow. I think they had to spin off a separate nonprofit foundation. I don't know how they did it, but I think there are some districts that have played with that idea. I don't know how it played out, but it's essentially charter schools were set up by the legislature to be public schools that we have to pay for, but they're considered public schools. It's,
Well, you know what I've seen recently are these PA cyber advertisements on television constantly. I mean, you know, and they
Oh, yeah.
also, I mean, the other thing, Eric, to your point, I mean, I agree with it, but just because we set up a cyber school, even though this year we were ahead of the ball, I thought in a lot of ways getting the virtual stuff off, a lot of people perceive, well, we're novices and the school district, you know, can't keep up with these people who've been doing it for years and therefore pulled their kids out and sent them to these cyber schools that had been, you know, cybering for a while. So I don't really know, you know, I just think it just seems to me there's so many unknowns about where we're going, but it looks like the charter school tuition rate is going to go up. We don't know what's really going to happen in Wilkinsburg as far as people purchasing houses. It's been going up and that's a good trend, but I just don't know, you know, it's concerning really to me.
Yeah, it's I can tell, you know, based on this, I read a lot about this, but also, you know, I can just tell the people in charge of our legislature really want charter schools to succeed, and they really want public schools to fail.
That's right.
That's
right.
Those are the laws that they're enacting. That's what they're doing.
That's right.
Yeah, and they're not held to the same standards at all, which makes it very difficult for public schools. Again, you know,
It's
not
the same model. It's what they do all the time. They you know, they hold their competitors to one standard and they hold themselves to a different standard.
Yeah, and we've noticed, and not only here, even in my previous school districts, we noticed a lot of our students that we would lose in Greensburg and some even here. It's because the structure, you know, they can't handle sometimes the discipline and things like that. So it's easier for them to do what they want there. And some of my friends who have worked in cybers and even some of the charters, they go through teachers left and right. There's no consistency, and since the accountability isn't there, it's an easy way out.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah, exactly.
for just a second. So so this is all really valuable, and it will help to inform better decision making when we have to decide which budget we're passing. But how did we get this far? You know, Mike, did you see earlier on that? I withdraw my question. Never mind. I withdraw that. I was expressing my frustration that we got this far along, thinking that we were really comfortable with a 3 mil tax rate. At least I thought that 3 mil tax cut, and then to at kind of the 11th hour, find out that it's not comfortable. You know, but. I'm just going to make that a statement instead of a question.
Sure. And, you know, that was sort of where I was trying to start to provide some background, you know, that, you know, this has been an ongoing process, you know, but really to do a good projection for you guys, I needed to have somewhat of a finalized budget. You know, and again, that occurred at the end of May. You know, and again, I did have this ready to go last week in case we had time, but we just didn't have time to get into it. You know, so I mean, this unfortunately is as timely as I could present it to you. But I do realize, you know, it does sort of make everyone ask that question, and, you know, rightfully so.
Yeah. I wasn't pointing a finger at you, but
you know, as much as we'd all like to have a tax decrease living in Wilkinsburg for schools, I think that, you know, taking money, giving people money back, and then 2 years later coming back and taking it back again, I think would be really a bad thing, you know, in many ways. I mean, I don't know. I just think maybe it's more prudent to wait a year or so, you know, or two, and see where we are. I don't know, because, you know, your projection looks like, and there's so many unknown. We don't even know what the amount of tuition is going to be for PPS this next year. I don't know that we know those numbers yet, do we, for special ed and regular ed? And that's inexpensive compared to what we're paying, you know, outsourcing some of these kids. So I don't really know. It really is I mean, it's concerning to me.
right.
Yeah, and I just to kind of, I hate to be the doomsayer here, but I mean, what I wonder why we should try to be fiscally responsible here. Why, like maybe the right thing to do is to be fiscally irresponsible and work to blow this up. Work to make it a critical issue that the state has to come in and say, look, you guys, you decreased your taxes. You no longer have revenue to be able to make it up in your community. We're going to come in and take over. Like, this is almost encouraging the state to come in and take over this whole process, which I wasn't around for when this happened the first time, but despite our best efforts here, there's a lot of smart people that have been working on this. And Rick and Michael, you guys have done some incredible work, and we are in a better position than we've ever been in. But the projections here say there's no way to win this game. There is no way to win this game. So maybe we should end the game soon.
Well, state takeover is a really ugly thing. I hear you, and I get it. State takeover, when you look at the details of what happens when they do that, is a really ugly thing, because the school board itself becomes almost powerless, and the state determines all spending. It's not that you get any extra money; it's that they cut things until you can make it on the money that you have. So it's
what if nobody runs for school board next year?
Was too late. Don't say that with Juanita on the call.
No, I understand, but I mean, at some point, it looks to me like this will become a critical issue. 2 to 3 years from now, 3, 4, 5 years from now, it doesn't matter. The strangulation of the public school system is being accomplished. We see it here on this graph.
Yeah, and I know, looking at I watched Hempfield. I saw what they had to do, borrow funds and this and that, and coming from a district was going through the same thing. All the districts were all feel the same crunch with the charters, and that's why we created a cyber charter at Greensburg, and that's why Hempfield's doing what they're doing. And you're right, everybody's feeling the same effects. So it's a tough battle. I'm always up for competition. That's why I'm thinking, all right, what can we do better and get that word out there and so on. So
which is admirable. I mean, that's the correct thing to do. We should try to compete as best we can.
Yeah.
My concern is that the game is unfair. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're
the game
right.
is stacked against us.
No
Eric,
doubt.
it's very unfair, but what I know about when Duquesne had the state takeover, it was a nightmare for those kids. I mean, they went to West Mifflin, I think, and they weren't really welcome there. I mean, it's the way it just was, like Ed said, it was an ugly, ugly situation, and I feel sorry for those kids, but I just don't know. I think what we need to do is get rid of our legislature and start over, but
I am very optimistic, though. I mean, coming from moving to the Pittsburgh area about 5-6 years ago, looking at some of these numbers here in the district and where you guys were, compared to coming from a district that was going the opposite direction financially as well. I'm very optimistic. I really am. I don't know. Maybe that's just me and my optimism and thinking about where we can go with a new building, with some of the staff we have, with the great job that Dr. Iverson and them did on with the teacher accountability and so on, that you wouldn't see in other places. I am very optimistic in how we can market us and I've said this, I think, to Ed before, as an elite elementary school experience here in Wilkinsburg, almost like that private school type of experience in a public school setting. And also not forget about what Pittsburgh Public has to offer. I live in East Liberty. If I had children right now, I would be sending them to Pittsburgh Public. I would not hesitate to do that because of the Pittsburgh Promise, the magnet school opportunities. And I was very, very, very impressed with the way Westinghouse, the direction they're going as well. So I see a lot of positives. But like I said before, I'm ready to compete and figure out what we can do to against these charter schools and these cyber schools and so on. But I think things are on the upswing as far as community and school. We just got to stay motivated and fight the battles.
I'm all for that. I absolutely hear you on that. It's just it's looking at the reality is at the reality of the numbers at this point with the budget due by the end of this month is tough. But you're right. It's good to hear you, Joe, talk about the light at the end of the tunnel and the higher purpose and the and the higher level of quality that would make this district sustainable. I get it. That's what's going to draw back students, and that's what's going to reduce the charter school costs, and that's what's going to balance the budget.
Yeah.
Only by getting better internally are we going to become stronger financially. That's the key.
What, not to disagree there, but again, I'm going the opposite direction here. What if we were to increase taxes this year and blame it directly on charter school costs, and then show this data to the community and say, look, this is what your charter school costs are doing to your school district?
Whoa. I actually, I don't know if I'd want to do it this year, but that's really an incredible strategy.
It's completely wrong-headed. I agree.
Yeah, I
And
hear you.
but it might make people see what's happening.
Well, Eric, you had suggested putting a notes in with our tax bills, which we can do, and just explaining where the money goes in the budget. And really, if people would read that, I'm not sure. It is a perception thing too with the school, to Dr. Jeff's point, if we can change perception,
we have to argue in the court of public opinion, right? I mean,
yeah. But if you sent letters, it might be. I think that's a very good place to start, and then maybe consider raising taxes in a year or two. I don't know, but that won't go over too well. I don't know, but I agree. I think it's people need to know, and they don't know.
The update, by the way, on the letter that would go with tax bills is we can't do it. Tax bills go out in those perforated kind of envelopes that you tear them. You know what I mean? To open your tax bill, so we can't insert a letter. Well, so what we're doing now is instead of trying to rush to have a solution with that for June, we're aiming to do a brochure that we would mail to every resident in July.
Hey, I like this because I just got a flyer in the mail from the district encouraging me to enroll my kindergartner, and I love this. This is the first real actual communication I've received in our school district since I've lived here, and that's the way I communicate personally. And if we had something that would go to every resident in the community and say, look, this is the effect. I would love to have. I don't know if we can do this. Michael, Rick, you guys tell me if you can do this. Here's the cost per student for charter schools. Here's the cost per student for your local school district. Hopefully those numbers are not equal, and the charter school is clearly above what it costs us to educate their local student. That comparison could make a big difference in the mind of a taxpayer that says, oh, why am I paying so much for these kids to go to charter schools? That's the kind of conclusion or the catharsis that needs to happen in a taxpayer's mind, to say, oh, wait, charter schools might not be such a great idea.
But also the quality of the school matters, and I think that's the other piece of the puzzle, that people have to see that they're paying more for less in many cases with these charter schools.
That's a great point.
And the other half of that equation, the financial aspect of that would be great. If Michael and Rick might be able to tell us that. On the other side, what are the academics of our students that are placed at charters? How do they compare to what we have in our schools?
Right.
I don't know that we have that kind of data that we could compare. And Joe, if you have an idea about maybe how we can get that or how we can put that together, boy, would that make a big comparison.
And it would be, and I love that idea because even if they're not required to take the same exams as we are, the same standards, but it's nice to compare, like you said, if we can get whatever we can get and we have this data, but sometimes even just throwing that question mark over there because we don't know. Nobody knows sometimes with them. And I love that idea, Eric. And, you know, and showing our successes here. One, I've never seen the amount of technology in an elementary school like I've seen here, and the resources that we have, and three, some of the staff. I mean, I have a teacher on staff who's been nominated for State Teacher of the Year that people don't realize. Like, I mean, this lady could teach anywhere in the state and get hired anywhere in the state, but people don't know about that. You know, so we got a heck of a marketing work, a lot of marketing work ahead of us because, I mean, we just got some. That's the stuff we gotta be able to do. But yeah, I'm going to work on trying to get whatever we can, Eric, on that. Definitely.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I think marketing for our district is marketing and communication. Really is two things that I've kind of seen, you know, pretty impressive progress on since we hired Kelly, which, you know, that's great. She does a great job, and I kind of credit her a lot with what I've seen improve over the last couple of months, including that flyer that came out. So I'm really pleased to see that. In any case, we've kind of gotten off track here with the discussion on whether we can do the millage reduction. You know, personally, I'm a little bit scared now.
Yeah,
Of voting for that,
ditto.
of voting yes for that, and you know I'm just being honest with where I'm at right now. You know, I look to the future. I don't want to figure out how to fill a $2 million, $3 million budget hole, you know, 2 years from now. I don't want to deal with that.
Well, so the thing is, we are at least now armed with this knowledge, you know, this information from Michael. There is a finance committee meeting on Monday. I think at that point, I mean, Deb's the chair of that committee. I think at that point, the decision will have to be made about what budget are we bringing to the board for discussion and approval. I think it's not the last shot at it, but that it's the last finance committee meeting shot at determining what millage rate is going to be in that budget. So that's the reason that I wanted to invite Michael to this meeting to just share this, to talk through the part. Seeing his PowerPoint is one thing. I did send that to everybody, but hearing him talk through it is quite a different thing. And so I just wanted us to have that information before Monday and before we have to make up our mind, what millage rate are we going to use? I mean, I don't know what a 1 mil. This could all wait till Monday. I don't know how much value there is in passing a 1 mil tax reduction. You know, I had a talk with Michael Lamb, and he thought, you know, 1 mil we might be able to slide through if we bring back charter kids and stuff like that. 1 mil might be sustainable. It might be responsible. He clearly comes right out and says here that 3 mils isn't sustainable. Right. So is there a number in the middle? Is there a sweet spot in the middle that we could pass that would be worth something to the taxpayers, and not drive us, you know, into bankruptcy? And that's what we'll have to wrestle with on Monday.
I think I still would, you know, if we reduce taxes by $0.25 mil, which, you know, just throwing it out there, we could still take credit for a tax reduction, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And I'm gonna put on Mr. Politician hat right now, right? We've reduced taxes previously, you know, reducing taxes again. You know, for the second, you know, we could figure out whatever the rate is, but for the second or third consecutive term or whatever, even if it's 0.25%, you know, I think, you know, we can check a box there. You know, I think if we message that correctly to the community, that actually makes a difference. What, you know, and it doesn't kill our budget. That's the other thing. So, you know, if we're going to reduce the millage rate, maybe we think about something very, very small, but, you know, kind of a token effort to try to do the right thing, right? We're still trying. There's a lot of uncertainty, and we can explain that, right? We would really like to reduce taxes more, We don't know that we can because based on the charter schools are such an unpredictable thing. We don't know what's going to happen. We can't do any better than that. That might be a good message.
Yeah, I mean, if you're kind of just looking at, the assessed value of a home in Wilkinsburg and just using, just a round number of 100,000, 3 years ago, a homeowner with a house of $100,000 in Wilkinsburg was paying $3,260 a year in taxes. Then when the board reduced those, they ended up paying $2,950, which is $310 less a year. And then another mill would equate to $410. So you've kind of over 4 years reduced a homeowner of a $100,000 house $410 a year.
So that's if we passed a 1 mil, Rick, right?
That's if you would do a 1 mil for next year's budget. Keeping it the same, obviously, it's just a $310 decrease. But remember now, that's compounded over three years. So that 310 now became $1,240.
And it shows, and at least we're moving in the right direction. I mean, Penn Hills, I don't want to bask in their discomfort or whatever that is, in their pain. But Penn Hills is having to raise by, I think, 0.53 mils
right
coming up. So Eric, you're right. Even if we did something modest, like a $100,000 home, a 1 mil would be, they save $100.
Right.
So that's something to think about. And if you go through all the charts and graphs, the 1 mil isn't as scary. It's important one thing to remember is that Michael's projections here don't count on us saving any money on charter school tuition. So we know that if every time we bring back 10 students, that's 10 times $25,000. That's a chunk of money that we're not spending.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
That's right.
a 1 mil. What would a 1 mil tax reduction cost us, Rick?
Roughly 400,000.
Okay, so divide that by $25,000 per kid, and you know how many charter school kids we have to bring back.
Right.
So I think it turns out to be about 15.
Right.
Yeah.
So Eric, you're right. Eric may be passing some. If we pass a 1 mil tax cut, we're actually moving 1.5 mils in a better direction than Penn Hills is moving. Not that matters all that much, but it does.
It does.
Yeah,
You're right, because people will compare us and they will look at us. Penn Hills is very much in the news. They've got a difficult problem to deal with. They've been irresponsible for a number of years. They're basically where we were about 4 years ago. So I think that plus they have the same problem we have. They have declining population. They have increasing vacancy rates over there. They've got the same problem. Now,
enormous charter school bills.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, the real estate market is turning around right now. There's weird kind of things happening in the economy. So, we may see some increase in home ownership over the next year or two. So, I'm kind of optimistic about that. And I'm also looking at what's going to happen here up on the hill here with Amazon and Westinghouse, the old facility. I'm kind of hoping to see some increase in home ownership in Wilkinsburg as a result of that. We'll see.
Right.
But the other thing that we might be able to, we might want to go ahead and approve a 1 mil decrease with the idea, and Ed, I'm going to take your idea here just a little bit further. The idea is we need to bring 16 charter school students back to pay for that 1 mil increase. And let's bargain with the community. Say, look, we're going to reduce your taxes by 1 mil. What we need to do to pay for that is bring 16 kids home, right, back into our school district, and challenge Joe, challenge the staff, and say, look, you guys get 16 kids back, and we'll do this mill, right? And challenge the community as well. Hey, we need 16 students to come back here. We get that. We can give you another mill after this one, right?
Right.
Put it out there and challenge the community a little bit too. Maybe they would respond to that. Who knows? But I'm trying to figure out how to play one side against the other to try to get to the common goal.
Right. Right.
You know, Eric, if I can just piggyback a little bit off of what you said, Eric, about the housing market. You know, I was talking with Paul yesterday or the day before, and, you know, Ed, if you remember correctly, when we started to handle our assessment appeals internally 4 years ago, when we took Matt's law firm off of that and we did it with our staff, we were handling around, let's just use 50 as a number of appeals a year. Well, and those appeals are all based off of and driven by the sales, right? We don't appeal them unless somebody sells a house in Wilkinsburg.
Right.
Well, this year we're at 118. So that has more than doubled of what we're appealing, which
Right.
means the sales of these houses in Wilkinsburg are going through the roof. People are buying houses in Wilkinsburg faster than anywhere. I mean, they're just going through the roof. And I think that kind of goes to what Eric is saying, that, and that's kind of why not only is our assessed value continue to increase, but our collection percentage has gone from 78 some percent to almost 85% over the last 2 years, because we're getting homeowners within Wilkinsburg that are now putting those houses back on the rolls.
Right.
You know,
And we've gotten, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say one more thing, Ed. You know, and you know, you said this a little while ago about, I can't remember how you said it, but you know, I think we need to look at this as the glass is half full instead of half empty. Most districts are sitting on these calls tonight, and they're fighting about tax increases. We're sitting here fighting about if we're going to lower it 1 mil, 2 mil, 3 mil, or no mil. And I think, you know, instead of looking at it half empty, let's look at it half full and say, wow, that's all.
I agree.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
Just the only other thing I'll say is that I had a chance to speak real quickly today with Kelly Hanna. We had a call when we had a call set up anyway to talk about what would be in that letter that goes with the tax bill, which isn't going to happen right now.
No, Ed, I got to talk to you about that because it can now.
Okay, we did talk about some other things, and I know Kelly's working with staff to put together a campaign where we're going to be calling every single family that left our Wilkinsburg last year to go to a charter school, every single one, and asking them, telling them about Spanish, about equipment, about laptops, computers, Chromebooks, all that stuff, and asking them to come back. So there were 50 some who left. So if we get, I mean, Michael Lamb's magic number was kind of half of that. If we hit half of that, we'll be in a really strong position. So there's going to be a really good and personalized campaign calling families to say, bring your kids back. All right, I'll stop now. But
Oh, it's good. I think actually we're coming to kind of a consensus here. I think, you know, the idea that, you know, we can make a tax reduction this year. Let it be tentative. Let it be, you know, let it be modest. You know, communicate to the community that we can do more if the community helps us. And we have our teachers doing the best that they can. They're working hard to make our grades go up, to be competitive with, and you know, take the evidence that we have available that Joe can help us find, and take that evidence and show it to them. Look, here are the grades. Here are things improving. Here's your taxes decreasing. We would like you to bring your kids back to charters back here to Wilkinsburg. If you do that, we can continue this same effort. We can continue to improve. We can continue to reduce taxes. I think that's the best message. Kelly's the right person to craft that. I think, you know, she's done a great job so far. We've got a good chance here to make this work.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree too.
I wasn't sure. Can I ask a question?
Of course, yeah.
What is the rush to lower taxes this current year? If he's already shown us it would be irresponsible and just leave it the current mills and then put in the promotions for telling them about charter schools and everything, and then the following year try to decrease taxes.
It's sort of like, so you know the old that management story about the bus to Abilene, the family that travels all through the heat to go to Abilene to get ice cream, and it's a miserable hot trip in Texas, and they all get there and they discover that nobody really wanted to go, but nobody would speak up and say it. I think that's how we got here. We got on a bandwagon of we can afford to cut taxes this year, and it just kept rolling, Juanita. And it's only at this point that Michael's showing us data that says it's not a wise thing to do right now. So you're right. The prudent thing, the safest thing to do is to wait. But as far as your question about how did we get here, that's how. I think Deb and the finance committee, for all the right reasons, was looking at projections and saying we can do this, and I was saying it also. But looking now at how bad and you know what, and it could work out that we could cut 3 mills and be just fine. It could work out that way, but it's a pretty big risk,
Right.
you know.
And I think too, Ed, that what happened was as we got closer and we had more accurate numbers from February through March and April and so on, we saw what our fund balance looked like it was going to end at the end of this year at almost $7 million.
Right.
And I think that's what kind of raised the flags of red flags to Debbie, saying, well, let's try to give some of this back to the community.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
And can I say something too about that? So 2 points actually. So what Rick just said there, a $7 million balance is roughly, that's looking at a quarter of our budget.
It's 20%, Mike.
Yeah, 20 some percent. Okay, so we're not supposed to run a fund balance generally. We're supposed to take in what we need and then spend what we need to. And generally we're supposed to end out the fiscal year even. And that's, plus or minus a couple of million is okay. Plus or minus 7 million is getting to the point where there's a concern there. Why are we not properly budgeting, right? That's the first consideration. The other thing is our district, Wilkinsburg, has, I believe it's the third or fourth highest millage rate in Allegheny County of all of the different taxing districts.
Yeah, we're third.
It's third right now. Okay, so thank you. We used to be the worst. We used to be highest, and so we've, fortunately, within the last few years, we've been able to reduce that millage rate and come down to not being quite the worst. So, but the problem with the millage rate is what a lot of real estate agents and real estate companies generally, one thing they do, for better or worse, they always concern a client who is buying a house with things like how good are the schools, how much are the taxes. Those two things are really prominent on their list of things to consider when they sell a house. And our district has historically not done so well in either category. So, two things that we're working on, primarily here, is improving academics so we can compete with other districts and we can attract, or at least not be disconsidered, right? We can attract other folks moving in from a real estate position, and then also try to get our millage down so we don't look like the worst when people go check that. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Did you?
Yes, it does.
It does. But we also have to remember Wilkinsburg was a community of 32 to 35,000 people at one point. We're down to 15,000 people, and we have real estate values that are all over the place. But what I've noticed too, where we're talking about the move-ins, we've had more kids from Google that have high-paying jobs moving into Wilkinsburg. Our community certainly up here in Black Ridge has there've been a lot of homes sold. And I think that they're selling for a lot higher prices than they were. So to Rick's point, I think that we are going to be getting more value for that. But we've got a lot of work to do in downtown area, But I think in Regent Square is doing well as well. So, I think that there's just a lot of unknowns. And to Juanita's point, I don't see the point in just waiting another year and then thinking about it actually. And see how these unknowns go for us, do the campaigns and all of that. I'm not opposed to doing, Eric, a mill either. I think I am not thinking that a 3 mill thing is good for us. But I think even if we do a portion of it, I don't know that we need to do it this year. We could wait and see, how things go this year. Because COVID's been a very tough year. And Forbes Road, that I sit on that committee on, their budget is flat this year, flat. I think, they're not giving any raises to anybody. The teachers are getting a little bit of, more because of healthcare and all that increases. But, So we are in a very different position in Penn Hills, what I'm seeing in Forbes, or just what I'm hearing up from other districts. And that's a good thing. But if it's not sustainable, I just think we can wait a year and see. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I keep talking about in the budget presentations and even during the finance committee meetings is the increase in our local revenue from real estate, the increase in the collections. You know, we're at the point now with the lower millage rate that we're very close to collecting within $200,000 of what we used to collect when it was 3 mils higher. You know, 3.1 mils higher, and that has to go with the new people moving in, the assessed values being higher, and that total increase. And I've been saying this all along in my presentation. I don't know if that's an anomaly this year or if that's going to be the trend. And if that's the continued trend, I think you guys are right. And I think what everybody's saying is, after next year, we could probably even look to lower them. But I kind of agree with Juanita saying maybe we should just pump the brakes a little bit and look at next year. Because if those trends continue and that revenue continues to come in, we're going to have to do something because we cannot sit on $8-9 million fund balances. You agree with that, Mike?
I do. Yeah, no, I do. You do need a fund balance to a certain point. You guys have exceeded that point. Obviously, a lot of that has been driven by the savings again over the last 18 months. We know that those costs are all returning likely in the fall, hoping, that the worst of COVID-19 is behind us, with the vaccine rollouts and, some of the restrictions being lifted. And I'm sure the teachers are anxious to, have their kids full time, in the classroom, and resume that normal education. So there's going to be a lot of costs where you saved money, that are returning, so those are coming back into the budget moving forward. Eric, I thought your idea, in terms of the messaging to, the community, and it ties in really with what Dr. Joe was saying about the competitiveness and, rallying the community behind bringing those kids back into the building. I think that's a great tool, at your disposal, and if you can bring 16 kids back and that generates, 400,000 in savings, that can make a difference, to a possible reduction, in the future. So, I realize that my presentation is somewhat of a wet blanket on everything that's, been discussed previously. But I do, there are positive things going on, and I think it would be foolish to not acknowledge those, and as Rick has shared, there are positives in the real estate market, and, there's just a lot of unknown, so if there is a somewhat middle road that, we can acknowledge at least what we see here, but, take advantage of some of these positives, I'm confident that the board will, make the decision that's best for your community and your students. So.
Right. Anything else for Mike here? Good discussion, everybody.
I'll just say thank you, Michael. Also, the information that you present to us and the details are very much appreciated. I know I glean a lot, and I get a lot out of what you give to us. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, and I agree, Michael. Thank you so much. It's been good. Great.
Yep. Well, thank you. And, I plan to stick around for the rest of the call. And, I'm always at the district's disposal anytime, if there's something that I can help Rick with or you as a school board with, please don't hesitate to reach out. So
what I'm actually wondering, this might be a question for Rick and Michael. Do we actually have to still go ahead with the budget presentation now, Rick? I guess otherwise it looks like we just had this call to talk about that millage reduction instead.
No, we can't. If you want to, I can pull it up, Ed, and we can kind of just run through some of the real quick scenarios about the, like Mike said, I can show you what a what our tax rate looks like now, how much we're collecting, and what it looks like as far as total collections. I mean, if we want to continue that conversation, but you know, as you and I have discussed, the presentation that we had last week in the PowerPoint, that was the presentation for this week, right?
Right, and we've all seen it.
Yes,
So-
and it was a public meeting.
Right. So I don't think we have to, I mean, I don't know if we have to do it again, unless you just wanted to do highlights of it, but it would be kind of hard to select which highlights to go through.
Right.
Mike, do you have an opinion on that? I mean, this was advertised as the public budget hearing. We got really off track, but the budget has been presented publicly already. So do you think are we required to do this? Eric, you know anything? Anybody have an opinion?
So, Ed, I do know that there is, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no state guidelines or policy or school code that says you have to have a public hearing.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
So the district, Ed, had, since prior to my arrival, has always called it that, and you guys have stuck to that. I mean, we are required to present the budget and make it put it on public display, and we have to do that within so many days of the passage of the budget, and we've already put it on display and we've advertised. So we're well ahead of the game in that respect.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we need to do it. Really. I mean, we've spent a good close to an hour and a half talking about this issue, and we had a really good discussion about it, and we'll be ready for Monday to have the final discussion about, okay, what are we going to do?
One more quick question though.
Yes.
We have offered a mechanism for public input, right? Have we received actually any public input? None?
No.
That would have been tonight.
Okay,
Yeah,
so this meeting was advertised, correct?
This meeting
yes.
was advertised not only in the paper, we had to advertise it in the paper, and we advertised it on our website as well.
All right.
Yeah, and you know, and not only when we do these types of meetings, the public, the purpose of putting it on display, and we do, Eric, at that point, is the actual numbers that we present to you guys. They're displayed on our website, and
perfect. Yeah.
so what happens?
So everybody can look at it.
Everybody can look at it, and then they can formulate their questions, even in an email to me, based off of that.
That is perfect. That's what we want.
The thing is, Eric and Denny, I've been doing this for 7 years. I don't remember ever any resident or taxpayer coming to the public budget hearing. Not even when they were public. We could have put out coffee and donuts and people wouldn't have come. I don't think so. I'm just saying.
No, free food brings people.
Yeah, that's right.
And even this couldn't be more convenient for people to attend, but nobody came. I don't see any reason, Rick, to go through a dog and pony show again when we've all seen it once. But I'll just ask Denny and Eric, the board members here, are you okay with not doing it?
Yes. I think I have one maybe foolish question, but probably to Rick and Michael as well. So if we have this large fund balance now this year, how is that presented? I mean, it's going to look like it's larger than it should be and all of that. But, the fact that it's going to dwindle over the next 3 years, I mean, how is that done accounting wise and accountability wise?
Yeah. So what we'll do and what we're required to do is, again, we're only allowed to have 8%
right
unassigned fund balance. So anything above the 8%, which looks like we're going to be like another 12% of that, we're going to have to mark as assigned somehow. And what we can do then, Dennis, is we can assign it to future PSERS increases, future healthcare increases, future charter school increases, and we could even move some into capital projects if we so desire.
I see.
But based upon what Mike is showing us, I would prefer and recommend we move it to future increases within the general fund budget and not move it to the capital project. Only because, one, like he just, we said, we don't know where we're going to be in 3 years from now. But two, remember, we're still receiving another $9.1 million next year that we have not even taken into consideration yet within this budget that can be used for some capital projects.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good.
And so just so, Ed, I just have one slide on the screen. If I'll just make it real quick, and it's really the first little block there. You can see that what we're saying next year's our expenditures are going to be at 35.3. Our revenues at 34.3. And we plan on using $1 million of the fund balance. And you can see that that's pretty much equates to the 3 mills.
Okay. So I think, putting this slide up, I think this can constitute the public budget hearing.
Actually, I think you're right, Ed. And I was just going to say, just to answer your question, I might want to still see if we can do like a very small token type of mill reduction, and like something like 0.25%.
Well, here's options, Eric. So we can say we even looked at it a little further. There's basically 4 different options, not counting keeping it the same.
Have you got a 0.25% option?
No, I did not.
That would be very impressive, but
Do you mean
I did not expect.
Do you mean 0.25% or 0.25 mil?
0.25 mil is what I meant.
No, he didn't do that. He put on. I have it somewhere.
It's on the screen, Ed.
I know, but
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rick added the columns, other columns in here to show the impact of reductions other than the 3. So
a quarter is about a quarter of 420, right? The total assessed value.
Total assessed value is 426.
Okay, so a quarter of that would be. Can I do a quarter like that?
No, I would do just a quarter mil, which would take our millage rate down to 28.25. I'm sorry, 29.25.
But I mean the actual dollar value ends up being what, like roughly?
Well, here, let's just do it. Give me 1 second. This is a spreadsheet with formulas in it, and I can change it to whatever you guys want to see.
You are that good, Rick. Thank you.
Are you able to come on Monday, Eric?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, that'd be great, because it'd be good to have you be part of the discussion about what are we going to do. So
if I just use this column here that was technically a 1 mil decrease, and I make it a 0.25 mil decrease, that's what it does. So here's the difference right here, Eric. From where our current millage is right now, 29.5, down to 29.25, it drops it down roughly $150,000, I think, right? No, $85,000. Sorry.
So take me back. 295, 2925. What? Huh? That's a quarter.
Yeah, a 0.25 mil.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what you're asking, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yep. So we lose about $80,000 in revenue.
Okay, so that's almost nothing, but it's still so here's right. You see what I'm doing here? I want to be able to give ourselves a track record of tax decreases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even just looking at this, so if you look at the green column here, and again, I know we don't want to belabor this issue, but if you look at the green column, this is what we budgeted for this year at the 29.5 mils. What we have next year budget, if we would budget with no decrease and the same millage rate, you're at 9.4. That's almost a $430,000 increase, totally just based off of the assessed value going up and the amount of collections. The collection percentage has changed from 78 to 80.5.
Okay, and really, okay, so and I heard you say this before. The collections percentage is making up some of our revenue, and I'm not expressing, I'm not sensing any concern on Michael Lamb's part at this point. I think what we're talking about is we have a nice budget cushion. We have the possibility to give ourselves a small millage decrease. I think we should go for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the directive of the board on Monday. They can tell me, I mean, I don't know if you were on the call, Eric, and part of the reason we're looking at 3 mil is there was I think it was a budget meeting probably back in early May where Debbie asked the consensus of the committee if we wanted to lower by 3 mils. And that's kind of why that's what drove me building this budget based on that 3 mil decrease.
Yeah,
So we'll have
I
to
wish
do that.
I wish Debbie could attend this. Unfortunately, she couldn't. But I'm sure she would be interested in exploring the possibility of doing something like this.
Right.
And I suspect she'll be in favor of some type of compromise in that respect. So I hope that we can discuss that on Monday, and
Yep.
let's let it go at that. Thank you.
Yep. Ed, you and I can talk tomorrow or whatever to talk about how we want to present Monday, because normally Monday is just the current year financials. But I think if you want to, we could maybe revisit this and make this the priority.
I should really defer that to Deb. You kidding? I'm in enough trouble with Debbie. You get paid to be in trouble with Debbie. I don't. So go ahead, laugh, Eric. You don't know what it's like to be in trouble with Debbie.
Oh,
So
you want me to talk to her?
so I think we'll have to come up with a strategy to get her to modify the agenda for Monday to include revisiting the budget.
Okay.
And Eric, you can drop her an email to that effect.
And what I know for sure, absolutely, is both of you are interested in the exact same thing, which is the success of our students in our district.
Right.
You guys are awesome.
Yeah. No, I think that should all fall on a contractor. So I think Mike needs to talk to Debbie.
I see how you are, Rick.
Passing the buck, yes.
No, I think if anyone, I'm sure Debbie, she could reach out to me if she has questions. I know, again, your board, and I started the conversation this way. I mean, your board has been very diligent. I work with a lot of districts. They do not get as much participation in the budget conversation that Wilkinsburg dedicates. So, I mean, that is to be commended. You have board members who care. And again, Eric, the goal is all about the kids and making sure financially that the resources are available, to the administration, the board, to educate the kids. So, I think everyone shares that common goal. And, again, I'm confident that you guys will come to a decision that, continues that financial path that you've been on the last couple of years. Again, in 5 short years, you went from having a negative fund balance to you now have a positive fund balance of, we're expecting close to 7 million. So, let's sustain that path. Obviously we don't need to increase the fund balance, but we need a sustainable path for the district as you continue to move forward. So.
Those sound like excellent concluding comments.
Yeah, I think so too. Thank you.
I agree.
Hey, thanks everyone. Unless there's
Thank
some
you all,
other
yes.
comment or question, we can adjourn.
Appreciate it. Thank
Thanks,
you very
everybody.
much, everyone. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful evening.
Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.